This is Charlie Rose.
You came out of a tough period. You were not happy about what had happened at the Federal Square downtown, in which they had removed something that you believed belonged there and was a piece of art, and the fact that the government did it offended you.
I think
yes.
Destroyed's a better word.
Destroy it. Destroy the piece. That's what they did. They didn't remove it. They destroyed it.
Yes, and
okay,
they had never done that in the history of their granting artists work before. And since then, what the government has done is they've changed the contracts they give artists, meaning that they can commission a work of art, and the next day they can tear it down. And I think as a result of that case, that's really a crime. And I think the government wanted to change their relationship to site-specific work, and they wanted to be able to have artists knuckle under. And I think it's really a horrendous thing that this government would sign contracts with artists and say, you can build a work, certainly, but we have the authority to tear it down the next day if we want.
Let me just understand this, because it is the mind and the creative mind of the artist that intrigues me. Did analysis, because you came out of with a certain element of depression after the federal government did that? No,
that's not right. My history is a little different. I went into analysis actually after Workman got killed.
Oh, I stand corrected.
Yeah. No, I think I was practically finished. I was probably in my 6th year of analysis when the Federal Plaza saga was going on. No, I went into analysis because Workman got killed, and then once you get into analysis, you know, all your other skeletons come out of the closet, and you realize that maybe you're there because of the sorrow you're feeling for the death of a workman, but really what you're looking at is your own internal dialogue, and that you don't have an ear to hear yourself, and that provided me with a way of playing my language back and having a sounding board and guidance so that I could deal with whatever was tormenting me. And it was very, very helpful. But I'll tell you, if you ask me, did it help my art? I think any artist that goes into analysis has the fear initially that they're going to lose something.
Exactly. I know some that have said that.
So the first
That's where I was going.
The first day I went, and I came back for the second session, and I said, you know, I had a dream. And he said, what's that? And I said, the dream was that you were stealing my mail out of my mailbox, that you were stealing my mail.
I can't believe that, man. Yeah. That's too...
Well, it's so exposed that you understand immediately that he's not stealing my mail, that I don't have to worry about my personality being altered, but I had that dream, and I thought I would get it out in front of us so we understood that that's not what's going on, and I can deal with it. But I think initially every artist that goes into analysis thinks, am I going to lose something? Am I going to reveal something? Am I going to give over?
Is there something inside of me that even I don't understand, but it subconsciously drives the art I do?
Yeah, and I guess the fear is that someone's going to tamper with that, or someone's going to steal that. And if you have a feeling that someone's stealing something out of your mailbox, they're taking your identity.
Right.
So the fear is you're going to lose your identity.
Okay, but how did you get over that fear?
I decided he wasn't stealing my mail. And I could handle it.
Well, but okay, did that process do anything to influence the future works of art you created?
No, but I think it made me more conscious of the conflicts that I had internally in relationship to my parents and my brothers, and to a larger extent society as a whole, whoever your sisters and brothers, and how to manage that, because I wasn't too good at it. I wasn't very good at anger management.
You weren't?
No.
Are you better now?
I was impatient in a lot of ways, yeah.
Yeah. Then?
In a lot of ways, yeah.
You were impatient about what?
I was driven, and I was headstrong, and I was a former athlete who wanted my own way, and I was a fairly bright kid, and I was fairly arrogant, and I didn't have much truck with people, and I was...
Did you think you were destined for greatness?
I was obsessed with wanting to do something in a way that I didn't want anybody to get in my way, so I was a little standoffish. I had probably a lot of armor on. And I think it wasn't until my mother committed suicide that the armor started to shed, because I really had to look at everything in my past and try to analyze all of it. And if your life is a book, and you turn it page by page and you reread it, you understand it. If your mother commits suicide, you have to reread the whole book. And you have to reread your relationship to all of those experiences you had as a child with your mother, and the interaction with your mother and father and brothers and sisters or whatever. So it changes your own history, and that was very, very helpful.
Your father did not think of you becoming an artist. He
Although
was not something that he...
No, my mother was the one who...
I know, but your father was not necessarily attracted to the idea.
Yeah, but he would critique the work. He would look at the drawings and critique them, and he was a hard taskmaster, and he would tell me whether he thought that they were pure or right or correct or imaginative or whatever. And he was, not that it was austere, but you didn't get a lot of pats on the back from him, where my mother was always very encouraging.
In fact, she said, my son sent you away to say, take a look at my son. He can draw. Maybe he has some talent here that needs to be nourished.
No, my mother actually, after the 3rd grade, and she went to see all the drawings in the room, really introduced me forever on as Richard the artist. And, and then I must say that my father came. My father came to see work, and my father was always very. My father wasn't the person who was the driving force, but my father had a certain pride in the fact that I was doing a job well done. I mean, I don't think. You have to understand, Marc de Suvro is also a very famous American sculptor, and he lived about 3 or 4 doors down from us in a big sand dune, so we grew up together.
This is in San Francisco?
Yeah, so we grew up together. They both worked in the shipyards. At the time, the shipyards gave them a dispensation if you would buy a tract house in the middle of nowhere. So there were sand dunes that went for about 10 square miles with a few houses built with no blacktop roads. And my family and the Marc de Suvro, Henry de Suvro and Marc de Suvro, the de Suvro family, lived in this sand dune. And Marc was making sculpture. It's interesting enough that Marc's brother became an attorney and my brother became an attorney, and both us, the 2 younger ones, became artists. So what's the odds?
So what?
It was in the water. I mean, it's hard to figure. You have 2 families alone in the middle of a very vast area of sand dunes where the boy and the 2 sons become attorneys and artists, and the other 2 sons become attorney and artists. That's hard to figure that one.
You have told me this story, and you've told others this story. 4 years old. You go to watch the launch of a ship.
Yeah.
It did what for you?
I think what it did is it made the notion of something that was big and obdurate and heavy to be able to attain a certain lightness and lyricalness once it was adrift and afloat. And
certain grace and...
Well, the transformation of... And my father had worked on the boat, in the ship, and the fact that when they launched it and they pulled away all the dunnage and it went down the chute and into the water, and there was this big relief that, when it first goes in, and one doesn't know if it's going to come up erect. So once it's afloat, there's a big celebration, and there's tubas and whatever, and, flags.
Right.
And for a young boy, it's an exhilarating moment. But I think the magic of it for me was that this heavy, obdurate object could also be something that was very light. And it's not that I thought about it in relation to making sculpture, but it became a dream that I've dreamt over and over during the course of my life, that I go back to that dream. The idea of boats afloat, the idea of ships afloat, the idea of working in shipyards, the idea of walking around hulls in shipyards. I've done a lot of that. So the ocean, the sea, the space of the sea, and being in and around ships has been a big part of my life.
And working in steel mills did what for you?
When I was 17, I caught rivets, and it was the quickest way to make money in Alameda in California. And I had to go off to Yale, and I had to get some pocket change. And so they were building the Crown Zellerbach building, which is in San Francisco now. And we were putting trusses together, and I was sticking rivets. And so I watched steel being rigged, and I watched it being hoisted, and I watched it being joined. And then when I came to making sculpture, what I realized, at first I was working with lead and rubber and processed materials, and the move into steel I thought was going to be a very conventional move, because that had pretty much been the historical material of Picasso and Gonzalez right up through Calder and David Smith. So why would one...
Not the same size.
No, but no, also used in a different way. Sculpture up to that point had been really the handmaiden of painting. They had used it pictorially to hang out in space, but the fulcrum, the way that it was anchored into the ground, was always false to its erection, to its possibility of its tectonics. When I came to sculpture, I really wanted to use the tectonics of the Industrial Revolution. By that I mean the building processes of the revolution. How steel had been used in bridges, how it had been used in silos, how it had been used to build the industrial buildings of this city, say. And to bring the use of steel as an industrial material and interface it with the art world is something that hadn't been done. To move in the procedures of rigging, the procedures of steel manufacturing into the art world hadn't been done, because steel had been used up to that point really as a three-dimensional sign for painting.
So therefore, if you take that, where do you think, our operative assumption is that this reflects the work of a great artist and you're a great artist. What's the significance of that in your greatness?
Well, it's not just, I think if you think about that move, that's a move that, say, Cellini did in the 15th century because he was making salt shakers, and then he took the idea of making small objects into sculpture. If you take Don Judd, he was like the idea of making something in carpentry into a box, and then, or you take someone like Warhol, paste up, or Barbara Kruger, the idea of paste up in the commercial world and bringing that into the art world. I think what the move isn't the greatness of using steel, it's the interface of one subtext conjoined with another subtext. It's called high art, the art world, you know, painting or whatever the tradition has been, and you bring in a whole other rationale for making, and you interface it with a different order, and you see if that interface can produce something that will communicate, not in the same way, but in a way that allows people to understand that there's an experience there to be had. And I think that's what's given me and other artists an advantage, in that it's not being bred by the same academy as people who have come before. The difference would be, and I think Audre Lorde said it, that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. Meaning, you have to find your own procedures and your own tools. Because if you're going to use the master's tools, you're just going to be doing probably lockstep with the academy.
So welded steel had never had any interest for you?
Never, no. Never. I'm not a welder, no. All these pieces, as put together, will freestand each section by section. They're not welded.
Are you contemptuous of welding?
No, but stitching isn't something that I'm into.
What are you into?
Into the properties of the gravitational load that will freestand in conjunction with other gravitational loads that will build spaces and places that you can walk into and through and around, where you yourself will be part of that force field that's only called up by the notion of that gravity that's conjoined by that space. These forms really invite you into a field of a gravitational load that is an expression of, or a manifestation of, the volume of steel.
Think about what you just said. Is that spontaneous, or is this something that you have labored over to understand, and therefore you can repeat it so eloquently?
No, I just said it. I don't think I could say it again.
Yeah, well, let's try.
Well, I don't have any retention for trivia here.
Well, I mean, it is amazing in terms of what you're doing. Let me just walk through process one time.
Sure.
Okay, I mean, this...
No, I could probably say it again. If you want me to say it again, I'll say it again.
I don't need to test you. I just want to, it just sounded almost like it was what somebody would write, you know, and then edit and carefully arrange sentence after sentence after sentence. It had its own powerful eloquence that normally conversation doesn't have.
I do think there's something that artists ought to be able to manifest, and I think they ought to be able to express their ideas verbally. I think if they can do that, probably the thought that's contained in their work will also be clearer to them. You see, there's a great belief that artists aren't articulate, and I think that's people trying to ghettoize artists. I don't think that's true at all. Most artists I know are fairly articulate.
Me too. My problem is enough of them don't go out there and articulate. Too many of them will say, I believe exactly what you just said. Too many of them will say, it's not me, the work speaks for itself. And I don't think that's enough.
Well, I think artists have a responsibility to try, if they can, to explain the thought that's generated by their work and the processes and ideas that are incumbent in the work.
I do too.
Yeah.
You know, it's not enough just to say, look, there's my work, go look at it.